So, what does a family look like? For most of us, there's a pretty standard picture that comes to mind. But what if we thought about family a little differently? Not just as a set of relationships, but as an organization, a system with its own unique architecture. Today, we're going to explore the structure of polygyny, a family model that, when it's designed with real intention, might just challenge everything we assume about how complex families can work and even thrive. This quote from someone actually living in a polygynous family really reframes the whole conversation, doesn't it? It pulls us away from this idea of scarcity, like there's only so much love to go around, and toward a mindset of abundance. Not necessarily romantic abundance, but an abundance of support, of mutual aid, and resilience. It really sets the stage for us to look at this not as a problem, but as a potential solution. When researchers looked into the emotional experiences of women in these families, they often found drawings like this, a blooming tree. It's such a powerful metaphor. It represents growth, right? Development, and a future with all these different possibilities. The idea here is that just like a well-cared-for tree, the right family structure can create an environment where every single person has the room and the resources they need to flourish. But to really get a handle on that potential, we've got to clear away some of the noise first. Let's be honest, the word polygyny comes with a ton of cultural baggage and stereotypes. So for the next few minutes, let's just try to set those aside and take a look at what we're actually talking about. Okay, first things first, let's get a clear definition on the table. Polygyny is specifically one man married to multiple wives. It's actually the most common form of polygamy, which is just the bigger umbrella term for any marriage with more than two people. This little distinction is going to be pretty important as we get into the details of how these things are structured. And this is where it gets really interesting. When you put the common stereotypes right next to what the research actually shows, the contrast is pretty striking. The stereotype says these relationships are always coercive, but when you analyze successful, consensual households, you see a totally different story, one based on cooperation, stability, and even economic benefits when a solid framework is in place. And that right there brings us to the core of this whole explainer. Success in a complex system like this doesn't just happen by accident. Nope, it happens by design. It takes a deliberate, really thoughtful architecture. This is the key analogy. A functional polygynous household runs on what you could call an operating system. It's a set of agreed-upon rules and protocols designed to manage all the complexities of time, resources, and emotions. And this isn't about being rigid or cold. It's about creating a predictable and fair environment where trust can actually grow. So what does this operating system actually look like? Well, research points to four main pillars. First up, radical fairness when it comes to resources. No favoritism, period. Second, structured time. The husband's time is a limited resource, so formal rotations are often used to make sure everyone gets predictable and fair access. Third, intentional space. The idea of one big house often creates more problems than it solves. Separate homes are key for privacy and autonomy. And finally, formal communication, having set ways to discuss issues and resolve disputes before they blow up. And this right here is the foundation of it all. Without clear, structured communication, the whole architecture just falls apart. It's the engine for adapting and building trust. You could say the structure makes good communication possible, and that communication is what keeps the structure strong. Okay, so we've laid out this model for success. But what about the criticisms? Because there are some very real, very serious arguments made against polygyny. We're not going to shy away from them. Instead, let's look at what the large-scale data actually says about two of the most common ones. This is maybe the biggest concern you hear, that living in a polygynous marriage automatically leads to higher rates of depression, anxiety, and just general distress for women. It's an argument that feels intuitive, but is it actually what the evidence shows? Well, when you look at a systematic review of all the studies on this, the picture gets way more complicated. About half of the studies do find that women in these unions report higher psychological distress, but the other half find either mixed results or no significant difference at all compared to women in monogamous marriages. Now, this doesn't dismiss the real pain some women feel, but it powerfully challenges the idea that bad mental health is some kind of universal, inevitable outcome of the structure itself. All right, the second major criticism is more of a societal one. The logic seems pretty simple, right? If one man has 4 wives, then 3 other men have to go without. And this pool of unmarried young men is then thought to cause crime, violence, and conflict. It's a compelling story, but does it actually hold up when you look at the demographic data?
Let's look at the numbers from a massive analysis of over 84 million census records. When researchers looked for a link between how common polygyny is and how many unmarried men there are, they found that the link they expected, more polygyny means more unmarried men, only showed up in 8% of the cases, just a tiny fraction. And here's where the data gets truly wild. In nearly half the cases, 46%, the exact opposite was true. A higher rate of polygamy was actually linked with fewer unmarried men. And in the other 46% of cases, there was no significant link at all. So if you do the math, in 92% of the societies they studied, the locked-out men theory just doesn't match what's happening on the ground.
So what in the world is going on? Well, researchers think it might be because societies where polygyny is common also tend to have super strong pro-marriage norms that push everyone towards getting married. The big cultural value isn't polygyny itself, it's marriage as a universal good. So the focus shifts from a supposed shortage of partners to a cultural push for everyone to couple up. So after looking at the architecture of success and putting some common criticisms up against the data, what are the big takeaways here? What can we learn from this model about how to design any kind of family or relationship? It seems that when these families are built on a foundation of consent and a really fair, well-designed structure, the potential benefits are pretty huge. You can get efficient economic units, bigger and more resilient support networks, and shared labor for things like childcare. This can also lead to deep emotional bonds between co-wives and more flexible roles for everybody involved. And what's cool is that the principles that make this work are actually universal principles for designing any healthy, complex relationship. First and foremost, consent has to be the absolute bedrock. Second, you have to be an architect. You have to proactively build that operating system of fair, clear rules. And third, you have to formalize communication. Don't wait for a crisis to figure out how you're going to talk. Build the channels for healthy conflict resolution from day one. And all this leaves us with a final thought. When you strip away the labels and the stereotypes, the questions that polygyny forces us to ask are really questions for all of us. How do we manage our resources fairly? How do we protect everyone's autonomy and space? How do we build systems of communication and support that are strong enough to handle all the complexities life throws at us? Ultimately, what does any family, no matter what its shape, need to do to build an architecture where everyone can truly, truly thrive?